Hey, Presonus users. I'm gonna try. I got a question about this expander, and I've got some confused responses. I'm gonna try to answer this as simply as possible, just what it does, not a bunch of techniques and all the ways you can use it, just what it does. Because I had some other questions about that. First of all, you have a threshold, and best way to understand an expander is it's working like a compressor, but only backwards. It's working on trying to compress the lower volume sounds and not compress the upper volume sounds. And I'll kind of explain that a little bit better. Your attack and your release are like the same on a compressor. How fast it starts to compress, how fast the attack is on it, and how soon it releases. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. Next, you have the threshold. Your threshold here is how soon, where it starts to compress. Your compression, you've got sounds, and anything below, say you've got it, and you want anything below this decibel range at, minus 24 or minus 18 dB, you want to compress anything under that. And so you set your threshold there so that any sounds underneath this volume level get compressed. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. Next, you have your ratio. The ratio works the same as on a compressor, but upside down. On a compressor, the ratio knob with the module and the node is up here, and as you bring that down to where it's more flat across there, you get like a brick wall limiter. And on an expander, it works backwards. Basically, the amount of ratio that you're putting on it, if it's way out here, it's hardly putting any compression on it, and less and less and less until there's like hardly none, 1 to 1. And as you bring that in, then it's putting more and more compression on any audio underneath this threshold until you get all the way up to there, and then as far as close to straight up and down as you can get, and then basically you're dealing with like a gate, and that's what a gate does. It just, anything below that threshold, it just wants to squish down. Does that make sense? And it's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. That's what it does. Now, we're going to talk about one thing. I'm going to try to make this real clear because some people get really confused about what this does. The range. If you start bringing this range node up, you will notice all of a sudden you get this other knee. Well, I'm going to try to explain this really simply, that this is your threshold. You're trying to compress any volume underneath that threshold. Now, it's going to immediately start compressing that with the amount of ratio that you've put on that. Does that make sense? And we just talked about that. Now, when it gets down to this other threshold here that you've set the range at, anything underneath that, it's going to let pass. Does that make sense? So, like if you have your volume level of something hits this threshold, and so it starts compressing it, it'll compress it down to this next threshold. So anything underneath this threshold, it stops compressing right there and lets anything underneath that pass. Does that make sense? So you have a range of what's being compressed from this threshold to here, and then it's letting anything underneath that pass. It's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. And next, the one thing I want to show you is like on this, as you're looking at this on a spectrogram or something, and this, I don't know if I can explain it that well with this, but what's happening, when you understand the decibel levels, let's say you're playing along something and you stop playing and there's background noise that's at this level down here. So you want to set your threshold there to compress that. And that's basically what it's trying to do, because sometimes at this lower levels underneath here, you'll have like background noise or amp noise, or you're playing the drums and the drums sound good while the tom's hitting, and then when they stop hitting, you've got this other noise that's below about here that's parts of the other drum set or something that you don't want in the track to try to clean it up. So you bring your threshold down to that point and try to get it to compress and suppress all that sound underneath it. Now, the other part of it, as far as talking about this range, wanting to leave other stuff underneath there can be lots of reasons why you would do that, and a lot of times they're very specific. But I'm not going to get into what all you can use that for. I just want you to understand exactly what this does. And your compressor in your studio does a fine job. You can get all kinds of different expanders if you would like, but that's basically what it does. It's kind of an elaborate gate, just like a compressor is a more elaborate limiter. You know, if you go from the expander to the gate, that you're basically just dealing with something that's just trying to suppress, and it's not going to do as much as the expander will. But it's that simple. It's not any more complicated than that. That's what your threshold is for. That's what your range is for. That's what your ratio is for, and your attack and release. I hope I've made that all clear so that you can understand that. And if there's something you don't understand about that, please let me know. Peace, hope, love.